Welcome back to the yard where faith and sports collide. We have our guest today, Jason Neese, who now we're going to share a little bit more of his story, how God has been amazing in his life and some of the things that he's gone through to where he's relied on his faith to get him through it. Jason, man, thanks for joining us and sitting in on this part.
Yeah.
You know, this is really my favorite part of each show. The sports talk is fun, and it wasn't fun getting beat by you in cornhole.
Right.
I don't appreciate that. But really the most important is where we get to chat about our faith. And so I know you kind of have at least the first part of your story. It's kind of a typical church kid story, right? Growing up in church and get to know the Lord and kind of walk us through that from Visalia. Is that where you're from?
Yeah, I grew up in the beautiful flatlands of Visalia, California. Grew up on some acreage. Dad, small business owner. Mom did all the bookkeeping for it. He also farmed walnuts and some stone fruit, so oranges and some cherries and plums.
Did you say stone fruit?
Yeah. So
what is that?
Stone fruit just means that's going to be your plums, your nectarines,
okay,
your cherries, your oranges. Kind of a farm term. So yeah, grew up there in Visalia, born and raised in the church. I was homeschooled for a number of years. I think early on, the beginning years, knew something was a little bit different. Some of you are tuning in now. I was born and had a speech impediment, so a stutter. And so really the journey began of just some hardship with that. I'd get excited, messages going in my head before I'm able to speak it out. And you know, elementary kids can be brutal. And so grew up with the stutter, had a lot of therapy. And so some challenging times there. Lord proved faithful and good and was able to get through it. If I took you back to the early years, you know, you'd be, come on, Jason, get it out. And so was able to overcome that. Really had a burden for the underdog. Felt like I was a little bit of an underdog growing up as a kid, and so that really motivated, moved me into leadership. I was on ASB in high school and really thrived in that realm, and used the stutter to really go, you know what, I'm going to actually turn that difficulty, and that's going to be a drive for me to make some things happen, and that carried me on, through college.
Well, let's put a pause right there.
Yeah.
With as being believers, that's one of the beautiful things about having a relationship with God and understanding His principles and understanding His Word. Where that right there is a situation where, because of your attitude and you understanding the Lord, you were able to take something that was very difficult, but
absolutely,
but flip it around, right?
Yeah.
And where you're in a way also a professional communicator into the things that you've done,
absolutely,
right? And how
which is interesting. My career path led me into that space of speaking.
But you wouldn't think at the point when you were struggling with it, if you just look at it through your physical lens, you're limited, it's embarrassing, I'm becoming bullied, and all those things might have been true for that time, but I love how God in our stories can redeem things, right? Things that the devil intended for evil.
Absolutely.
How if we give him the Lord, he can flip it. And not only that, I love how that gave you a heart for the underdog. So that's great how the Lord's able to do those things. So
yeah, so good. I think through it, being able to push through it and be in some places, in some spots where I couldn't have seen that walking through that difficulty, but was able to overcome and to push through. And the reality is, we've all been dealt sometimes a deck of cards that aren't maybe the cards we want.
Yeah.
We didn't ask for that specific hand, and so we've got to learn to operate with that hand and know that there's gifts and talents and abilities even within that hand that was given to us. And so for me, that's really been key, is realizing that, hey, everybody sometimes has some cards they don't necessarily like. It could be looks, it could be intelligence, it could be I was born and raised in this environment, or I had a fatherless dad, I had a motherless mom, I've been hit with addiction or difficulty, and yet with the Lord's help and His providence, you can overcome and you can win, but you gotta have some grit, and you've got to have some fortitude.
Yeah, and that's great too, because having faith and having a relationship with the Lord, it's not a get out of jail free card, and it's not like, well, once you make that decision, that everything's perfect. Just because you love the Lord didn't mean your speech impediment went away.
Sure, and I still deal with it today, and like you do, I might hit something and you just nod and smile, and we're gonna get through it together. The RPMs will kick in and it'll go to the next gear, and we'll make it happen.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit more about, one thing is being a kid growing up in a Christian environment and, accepting Christ as your Savior at a young age. But I know with me, I had to go through like a series of things to really solidify that faith for myself, as opposed to, I'm a Christian kid, my parents were Christians, I was a pastor's kid, I've accepted the Lord, but there came some events and some times in my life where I had to go, no.
Yes.
Jesus Christ is my Savior, and I'm going to live for Him.
Yeah.
What were some of those moments in your life?
Yeah, and our testimony, right? There's movement, there's depth, it grows. Our testimony really shouldn't ever stay the same, because more life experiences come, more fruit. And so a major point was my senior year of walking through a series of making some bad choices, and really hit a key moment. I'll never forget it, with my 1968 International Scout, which I still have today, pulled over in a cornfield on the outskirts of Visalia, and just was done with the way things were going, and made a key decision there to realign, to reset, to reshift, to recalibrate, and be fully used by the Lord, which set the trajectory, which landed me at Point Loma Nazarene University. And it was there that I became a resident advisor for a wing, a wild group of freshman boys down at Hendricks Hall, and decided to go into ministry and pursue pastoring and wanting to make a difference in the lives of youth. So that set the trajectory, that moment, my senior year. Lots of moments at PLNU, serving in missions, leading Bible studies, and then I interned for a guy named Jeff Bolster, who's now the VP of Student Development at Point Loma. And he really said, hey, you're gifted to go into ministry, to be a pastor. And then that set the trajectory of me moving out of pre-law, which that's where I was headed. I saw the movie Jerry Maguire. Who didn't want to make deals in the shower, right? Yeah. And began a movement into ministry where I did junior high ministry for a number of years, and then I went back to my home church. I replaced my youth pastor, and I did youth ministry there for almost 14 years, and then cycled back, and then came back to Point Loma and did ministry at a church there for 5, and began to really move into a groove of being a pastor really to families.
Sure.
That was the bread and butter there, and came with a host of experiences. Of course, got married along the way.
So let's put a pause there.
Yeah.
Because when I met you, which was about 10 years ago, you're now into your career, right? Into doing the things God has called you to do, being very successful at it. And when I met you, by the looks of it, man, everything was perfect in your world. Beautiful wife, beautiful children, right? Just a great guys. We got to know each other, and you were well loved. And I was like, wow, this is a really cool guy to meet, enjoying to get to know you. But I know that on the outside, it looked like, man, this guy has the perfect life. And talk to us kind of like from when I met you, the curveball that came,
Sure.
and how faith got you through that.
Yeah. In October of 2011, experienced a really big curveball. My wife, Britton, who I met in college at PLNU, she was diagnosed with stage 3B breast cancer, and it was also in her lymph system as well.
What was your original thoughts, Jason,
Yeah,
as
I
a
remember
husband,
yeah.
when you got that news?
Yeah.
What went through your mind?
I remember it. I had just been offered a position at the Rock Church, and we got the call from her OBGYN confirming that it was cancer. She was breastfeeding our youngest, Belen, at that time, and noticed a lump. And you just think it's benign, you're good, and move on. You're not expecting cancer. So we knew things right off the bat were going to shift, and I immediately wept with my wife. But then, as a guy, you move into let's tackle this and let's fix this situation. Despite all that, we still left Visalia, where I had been at that church for almost 14 years, and we came to San Diego, which really was a blessing to get some of that care that we probably wouldn't have got in Visalia, just it being a smaller town. And so we hammered through it. We pushed lots of surgeries, lots of difficulty, lots of prayer, a lot of people from the community rallying. There was high moments where we thought we're out of the woods, and there was things where we were back in it, and we were dealing with, again, surgeries, and we were dealing with infusions, and we were dealing with chemo treatments, all the while raising 4 kids. So you can imagine the pain and the difficulty, and places where very private, it's tough, but as a male and as a lead and as someone who is trying to set the pace, I learned very early on, if I don't set the pace is going to be set one way or another, and it may be a pace that I don't want. And so I've got to set the pace, I've got to lead, I've got to listen to the Lord, I've got to follow, I've got to hold on to my faith even stronger and tighter in the midst where it would have been really easy, and I can see how things can get haywire and they can neglect their faith.
Yeah.
But it was important to me, this is where the rubber was going to meet the road, and was I going to fully buy into this relationship with the Lord, and was it going to become real? And so I saw it become very real. If you know my wife, you knew Britton, tough as nails, a warrior. Like you said, if you would have saw her, you would not have known she was dealing with cancer, right? You would have thought everything was good. And so we tried to move through life. We tried our best to keep things as normal as possible for the kids, with sports and getting up, going to work, providing for my family, all the while balancing, right? Lots of treatments, lots of appointments. I have a little bit of PTSD walking into a hospital or for an appointment, because so much of our life was consumed by that. But you just begin to take on life a new way, and that becomes your life, that becomes your reality. And so you're trying everything you can to keep your bride alive. And so you're willing to do whatever it takes. And so we did that, and she hammered long and hard. She passed away a week before Thanksgiving, so November of 2017. So she was diagnosed in October of 2011. But talk about change, backing that up. Yeah, wife diagnosed with cancer, new job, new school, new home. A lot of stuff was thrown at us that you not everybody experiences all that at one time, but the Lord was good and faithful and walked us through and brought us a great community too.
Well, along the way too, and I know you know this, but while the effect that Britton had on her community and beyond was amazing, and we were part of the
Yeah,
people that received that.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
we got to mourn with you. We got to pray with you, celebrate, go into a depression. But all along, your wife was such a leader, Jason. And I know you know this, but and my wife and I chat about this often, and we still have a picture of Britton that in our home that reminds us to pray for you guys and reminds us of her. And for my wife,
Appreciate that.
it reminds my wife of kind of, as Britton handled this, you know, it puts a lot of things in perspective on, wow, really what's difficult, what's important in life. And I know that she was a champion along the way, and it has a legacy that'll live beyond, you know, her years of pouring into people and being a great example. What would you have to say for those that, Christians that are suffering grief? Because it's hard to kind of, how do you say God is good, right? How do you say that He's loving? How do you serve Him? And here my young wife and my mother of my 4 kids is taken away by cancer. How did you wrestle? How did you wrestle with that?
Yeah, early on, Britton had really earmarked a phrase in the Greek. It's Eucharisteo, which is this essence, this idea that joy, contentness, and gratitude always precedes the miracle. And so Britton, and she really set the pace in a lot of this. She chose to flip the cancer on its head and still choose joy, still choose gratitude, still chose contentness in the midst of that, and really held to the faithfulness of Scripture and really got the idea that we are just passing through, that this is not our home. So that was very central, and Britton set the pace in being joyful and having a heart of gratitude, and that really began to permeate through our family. And so we lived as if Britton in some ways didn't have cancer. We just kept going, even though we had these appointments and these infusions and these treatments. And it really helped us set the pace to operate and do life not with this cloud of cancer before us. And we really believed that the Lord could heal. And we had moments where there was healing, and because the original diagnosis was very grim, and yet Britton was able to push through, and we really believe that was through a heart of Eucharisteo, of being joyful and having a heart of gratitude. And also within that, part of Britton's journey was we felt like we had experienced the Lord in a way that many people had not experienced it based on her diagnosis. So we had some, in other words, our relationship, it actually thrusted to a new level of love, of joy, that I'm not sure I would have experienced. Wow. Not to belittle other people's experiences or their relationship, but we felt like our love even grew fonder and deeper, and we had experienced the grace and the love of God in a way that we would not have. And Britton was very vocal about that, and it created a true dependence on the Lord, where I'm not sure I would have never had that kind of dependence on Him. Yeah. And we showcase that to our family, and I believe that we showcase that to our friends. It was still hard. It was still difficult. It was still ugly. There was moments that I would cry out saying, "Transfer the cancer to me, Lord. Let it be me, not my wife." And there was moments where I thought this was it, and Britton would bounce back and she would hammer a couple more years, and we thought, this is great. You know, maybe she'll hammer on 10, 12, 15 plus years, but ultimately the cancer I remember getting the call when the cancer came back. We were actually at the couples retreat in Palm Springs with The Rock, and we had gotten word at that retreat that the cancer had now spread to her liver, and that was a tough one because we knew you can't survive without your liver. And so that was where things were really put into high gear, and we had to figure out how to battle that. And then, of course, ultimately it spread liver, stomach, area within her heart, and she hammered good, long and hard, and then went to be with the Lord, of course, a week before Thanksgiving. And sweet moments, of course, leading up to that, but difficult as well, of course. With kids, makes it even harder seeing Mama go.
So through that, let's fast forward now to where you are now, where God's grace and His love helped you get through that. And now with that attitude of joy, how He's continued to bless you guys, even though you've gone through such a difficult time.
Yeah. So the one of the beauties that Britt and I had is she got to really design her memorial service, right? So we got to talk through songs, who she wanted to speak. Britton wrote letters to each of the kids, including me. At that time, I couldn't imagine being with anybody but Britt, right? And one of the things that she had said is she wanted me, when the time was right, to find love again. And of course, you regard that, and I just thought I'd be a single and I'd be stag for the rest of my life. And so Britt had passed, and through the journey of singlehood, which is a whole nother podcast in and of itself, of what's it like to been married for almost 20 years and then be single, and all the grief, the pain, and the nuances that come with that. Just as you walk into a church and you normally sit here, or you're invited to something, but everybody's married. Well, who do I talk to? Where do I sit? And so there's all parts and pieces of that. But I had connected with a gal that I had worked with at a church in Orange County through Facebook, and I had noticed that her brother had died in a tragic rock climbing accident. And she had said, hey, do you have some resources? We're navigating through a difficult time. My brother Tim leaves behind a wife and 2 boys. You're ahead of the game. Can we glean from you? Is there some resources? So I began to just share a few things with her that I had worked with her at a previous church. And through that, I met this widow. Long story short is, through that journey, we had chemistry, began to grow fond of her 2 boys, and so fast forward, I'm a newlywed, and we were married in October 5th of 2019, and we're emerging family, 4 boys, right? So Jameson, Sutton, and then Jack and Levi, and two girls, Belen, my youngest, and then Marin, my oldest, who graduated this spring and is headed to PLNU, our alma mater. And we're a family of 8, both a widow and a widower. Different stories, right? Different ways of death of our spouse. A lot of change and difficulty. The Lord has brought us together, and it's really a story, like you said, of redemption, of grace, and the Lord's favor that He would so bless me with, and find it gracious to provide a wife and be still a family, but now a larger family. And in so many ways, I take Britton into this new marriage, and she takes Tim into this marriage. Her name is JJ, short for Jennifer Joy, and we've established a home here in North County and connected to a church. She keeps me healthy. She's a dietitian, so there's stuff I'm taking. I have no idea what I'm taking, but it's been a blessing. Sounds trite, but it really has been a joy and a blessing. Still hardship, right? She's got a way of doing things. I've got a way of doing things, and so we're a merging family. And I get 2 bonus sons along the way. So I got 4 boys to hunt and fish with, which is great. I was so proud this last fall. Each of them got a deer, and so it was just a joy to see them harvest that and have all that meat, especially in this COVID.
they set you up for the COVID.
That's right. That's right.
For those of you guys who are watching this, God is real, and He doesn't guarantee an easy time. My perspective a lot of times is that life is going to be hard either way. If you don't have the Lord, life is going to be hard. Life is going to be tough. It has its ups and downs. And if you have the Lord, life is still going to be difficult. But with that comes opportunities for Him to redeem the difficult things in your life, for Him to give you hope, peace, joy all through it, and somehow to use those difficult things and turn them around for His glory. And through the process, you know that He's going to supply all your needs. So if you're watching this and you're going through a difficult time, which most of us are in some capacity, just encourage you to trust on the Lord, lean on Him. And if you've never made that decision to follow Christ, I just encourage you, make a decision to say, God, right there in your heart, I want to follow you. Reach out to a friend that send me a note. Reach out to Jason, that we can walk you through establishing and creating a relationship with the Lord, because really that's the ultimate, the best thing you could ever do. Hey, Jason, thanks for joining us, man.
Of course, man.
And thanks for whooping my tail on some cornhole. Love you, bro.
Yeah.
And we'll chat you soon.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, brother.
All right.
Thanks again for joining us in the yard today where faith and sports collide. Huge thank you to Jason Neese for coming in and hanging out with us and sharing his story of redemption. Thank you to Christian Podcast Central for partnering with us again. You guys tune in next week as we have another great time here in the yard. Have a great week.